Hi, Partovies.
Hi, Anne.
And
How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good.
Feeling celebratory, elated, relieved.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. As we're recording this, it
I
is,
agree with relieved for sure.
yeah, it's
Although
November
although
7th.
not yeah, not completely because I will say that, the people I listen to basically say we need to be on high alert from now until April because there's likely to be a response.
Yeah.
Um, so we'll see but I think it's, my view is that uh, if it looked like that Harris was going to win, and sorry, I interrupted you, but you were in the middle of saying we're right after the election,
Yeah,
right?
today is Thursday, November 7th. We had the election Tuesday. Pretty much woke up Wednesday morning. Trump won in a landslide. We've got a super majority in the House, the Senate, the executive branch. So it's historic.
Yeah,
It's just, I mean, it doesn't matter kind of what side of the aisle you land on with politics. I mean, that's just historic,
yeah.
right? So anyway, proceed.
Well, yeah, thank you. So what I was saying is that the basically the predictions that I had seen and I agree with, is that if it had looked like that, um, uh, Vice President Harris had won, that there would be a lot of people challenging that result, and there'd be potential conflict around that immediately.
Right.
And I think now the consensus is more like that because Trump won and Trump won in such a decisive way, that the response from, and I don't really mean the Democrats, actually, when I say the response, I mean, they may be sponsoring some of the response, but I mean from like radical left-wing groups like Antifa, et cetera,
Sure.
um, will be coming, but probably sometime between the inauguration and April. So, just be ready for that is what I would say to everyone, regardless of which side you're on, because, if things do get violent, which I think is very possible,
Yeah,
we all need to be, careful and stay safe and all that good stuff. So, yeah.
exactly.
Well, one of the most exciting things for me is when Donald Trump said, President Donald Trump said, uh,
President-elect.
President-elect, uh, I'm letting Bobby loose to do his food thing.
Right.
And word on the street is that five of the CEOs of major pharmaceutical companies um, are meeting
Yeah,
because
I
they
heard that.
know, yeah, they see the writing on the wall.
An emergency meeting, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
they going to do? What are they going to try to do? Yeah, it's interesting. I mean,
Mhm.
they definitely. I'm surprised that they're just now having the meeting, right? It seems like, in my view, of course, I have a different take on all this stuff, and I think a lot of people were very thinking like this was going to be a really close election. I think because they were watching and looking at the polling as being accurate
Hmm.
versus looking at polling relative to how it looked 4 years ago and how it looked 8 years ago and saying, okay, well, if the polling error is off and it's off in a similar way as it was 4 years ago and 8 years ago, then the likely result will be. And I think if you were asking that question, then the answer was very clear. We were going to see a Trump victory and probably a Trump landslide, which is what I had predicted. Well, I predicted a Trump victory a year ago, but I predicted a Trump landslide, a week before the election, because it was very obvious to me that was what was going to happen. And then, people like Liz Selzer, the famous podcaster from Iowa, just basically went out and embarrassed herself, I think, to try to make the election look like it was going to be closer than it was. But, I think that, as I said to all of my Democrat family and friends, um, probably a year ago, maybe even longer, I said, the only Democrat, now former Democrat, but the only Democrat who can beat Donald Trump in this election is Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah.
And none of them wanted to hear it. And so, of course, what happened, and now he's joined with Trump, and he's actually going to be part of the, as a member of the winning team, he's going to be able to really hopefully make a big difference in policies. And I think for me, the big question right now is he going to do it as Secretary of HHS?
Or AG.
Is he going to be Attorney General? Is he going to be, some other secretary, or is he going to have some sort of czar role? And then, my whole thing about, or maybe even he could even be chief of staff. But, to me, as a czar, the problem with the czar term is it's sort of like that power derives directly from the president. I mean, they all derive directly from the president, but the president has to make it really clear, for example, that you, Secretary of HHS, you, Secretary of Agriculture, you, Secretary of um, EPA, and perhaps one or two other agencies I haven't thought of, you all report not to me directly, but your boss is Bobby Kennedy, right? And basically that has to be part of the process. And Bobby Kennedy literally has to have full reign to pick those people. And it's almost like he's kind of like the under president for health, right? And that would be one way to do that that might actually work and be effective. I think in the past, the czar role has been largely ineffective because I think it's largely been unclear what power those people had and what role they had in the administration because it wasn't this official role. So yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
my only question or concern about that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, well, those are all valid. And as far as Kennedy goes, I guess it kind of depends on whether we want him over HHS, which covers a lot of territory in the health field, or do we want him over the Department of Justice, which covers a lot of territory in a, sort of a different branch of the bureaucracy. So, I would be happy either way. I think we could have many different people as head of HHS and get a lot accomplished. And I would love to see Kennedy as the Attorney General, frankly. I mean, it's a legacy position for him. And also, I think he could do some real good work
Mhm.
in as sort of the leader of the DOJ.
Having met him and uh, been with him,
Yeah.
I get a sense that he will choose something that supports his free spirit
Yeah.
and his creative spirit. Something that doesn't quite lock him down, but he has oversight in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
That's what I assert.
Well, I love that. What do you feel like he's going to end up um, doing? Where, what is your prognostication?
Well, the abroad, the czar of health. It's going to be so very broad, and he's going to be involved in so many things.
Yeah,
Is what I see.
health.
Mhm.
I think it would be great.
It'll be interesting.
It will be interesting. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's an
I
exciting time.
it is, and I want to address something because even though many of us, like the majority of the American people, are relieved, are
Yes.
celebrating, we have many brothers and sisters out there that are one in despair, one very depressed about what's happening.
Yes.
You can see the mood, on social media. And even some of my most beloved, powerful, influential friends are stating that they have lost faith in humanity,
Yes.
which just completely blows my mind and perplexes me.
Well, and it's like I think it's the opposite experience for me. I feel like I have faith in humanity that I didn't really have a week ago. I
Right.
mean, literally, my experience of life is like, oh, So people have not gone off the rails with this, radical woke garbage, like people are not all in with that. And I know that's a strong statement to make, but that's honestly how I feel about it.
That's valid and great. And where I was going is that there are people on the other side, that have something to contend with.
Yeah.
One, the cognitive dissonance, of really taking a look at, has media lied to me all my life? Has big pharma, big hospital, big agriculture,
Yeah.
education, have I been lied to? It,
I don't think I got to interrupt you because I don't think they're asking that question at all.
Hold
Like
on.
at all.
I know there are a lot of people that are not, that a lot of people that have just been programmed very, very deeply and are in a position where they outsource a lot of things. They outsource, who's going to lead them and guide them. They outsource who's going to doctor them. They outsource who's going to teach them. So they're just gobbling up, whatever the system is feeding them. I'm talking about those people who have some semblance of, when we refer to people waking up.
Yeah.
So I'm inviting those people to be curiously engaged, to
Yeah.
ask the question, why
Yes.
a lot of battleground states turned red, the
Mhm.
results were red. Why, there's such a large percentage of people that voted for Trump.
Mhm.
Why, so many people are starting to question, the pharmaceutical drugs that doctors are prescribing, like really get on the court, right, of their lives.
Yeah.
Why the conventional educational system isn't working. Why we have such high rates of depression.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about Gen Z. I mean, that's a whole nother
Yeah.
demographic of young people that are struggling
Yes.
with identity, with health. So I'm inviting those people to get curiously engaged. And also why throughout their lives they have allowed this outsourcing of their own power.
Mhm.
Okay, even though I might be celebratory, like out there, like we intend to ride this wave and take and jump on this momentum of this time
Yes.
to do what it is that God calls us to do. Because even though, God, Jesus is out there, we are made in an image and we are his eyes, we are his voice, his hands, and his feet.
Yes.
So I agree with everything you said. Just to be clear, I think that maybe with one exception, which is that and I think my bias, just so we're clear about my bias is that I've been engaged with people on the left, my friends, who are all men predominantly. So I just want to own that, right? And having conversations with them about all of these topics, trying to present all of the evidence that I feel is really compelling. And I think by and large, there is this sense of, I don't even really want to look at your evidence. I'm not curious, like that's literally
Yeah.
one response I got is, I'm not curious and I'm not interested in why somebody would support Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I got your invitation. I love your invitation. I hope people take you up on it. But I mean, literally, what I need to communicate in this conversation is like, I have been very shocked and upset and frustrated over and over and over again with people's unwillingness to take a look at everything you just said, because they don't perceive their media sources as being propaganda, as being biased, as being someone else thinking for them. They perceive those sources as the reliable, trusted sources of facts.
Yes.
you know, of data, of information that is unbiased, and that in fact what we in our pursuit of independent media, you know, are doing is consuming biased content, which they say is, you know, basically useless or valueless,
Yeah.
right? So this is a fundamental challenge that I've experienced, and I don't honestly have an answer of how we deal with it because I've been trying to deal with it and trying to work through it, but it's like even getting someone who's, you know, it's sort of like I will send independent media sources. I'll send a Joe Rogan episode. I'll send a Dark Horse podcast episode. I'll send, you know, a Modern Wisdom Chris Williamson
Okay,
episode.
hold on.
But let me just finish this thought, and then you can
Okay.
say whatever you need to say. I'll send these episodes over, and then they'll send me back, you know, Jacobin, Vanity Fair, Vox, Slate, you know, basically New York Times. You know, we live in such different information ecosystems, and we trust different. And look, Jonathan Haidt gets into why that is. You know, he is a great scholar of the modern era, and he's one of my favorites. He basically is like, look, you know, we have our emotional reaction to things, and then our brains get into gear and get busy justifying those emotional reactions. And so at the end of the day, we look for sources that are going to provide evidence for our emotional reactions.
Yeah.
And I get that. And so, you know, I think that's a good time for me to transition and hear whatever you have to say about
So
it.
I'm going to provide an analogy, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Let's take the Kellogg cereal example.
Yeah.
Okay. So Kellogg's Fruit Loop cereal in this country is riddled with toxins,
Right.
chemicals, and food coloring and whatnot, compared to, you know, our European counterparts. Okay. And then you have families and, you know, mostly women, moms, picketing in front of Kellogg's corporation, you know,
Yes.
saying that stop this, like stop doing that. Okay. And I bet you, Anne, that Kellogg's Fruit Loops is flying off the shelves, continuing to fly off the shelves. Okay. Because you've got classes of people. Okay.
Yes.
You've got the classes of people that, like Ryan said, okay, not open, just gonna be the status quo, do their thing, not really open their eyes to anything that they're consuming because they're outsourcing that. Oh, that this toucan looks really nice and fun,
Well, the
you know?
grocery store wouldn't put it on the shelf if it wasn't
Safe
okay.
to eat. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Right. On the level that the children can see it, you know, that they
Yeah.
purposely do that. Okay, so you've got that class of people, and then you've got the people that are picketing. Take
Yeah.
the food coloring out, take it out. Okay. But then you and I and Ryan know that what you'd be left with is still a shit product.
Processed, extruded, you
Yeah.
know, GMO grains.
Yeah.
Uh,
Better for you isn't good for you.
yeah, but better
Right.
for it just means slightly less toxic. It's still
Yeah.
toxic. It's
Okay.
just slightly less toxic.
Feeding your
Yeah.
children that, even with food coloring removed in the morning, is not optimal. Okay.
Oh, sure.
Okay. So you've got those classes of people. So here you've got us. What would you ask? What would you say, or how would you invite those people who are like, okay, gobble gobble, here, child, have as many Lucky Charms and Fruit Loops as you want.
Oh.
So I'm going to ask the both of you, how would you crack into that?
Well, I want to kind of jump in here because
Yeah, I want to hear what Ann has to say
I'm
first.
hearing, Maddie, you've got a call for us to be empathetic and understanding and try to bridge the divide. And what I'm hearing also from Ryan is what I really identify with too right now is this sort of like betrayal, grief process because we have people who we are close to in our lives that they would prefer to believe the New York Times versus listening to what I am saying. I am an intelligent human being that you've known your whole entire life, and yet you're going to sit there and think that that I'm crazy now because the New York Times said so or whatever, right? That's a huge betrayal. And it and
Yep.
it and it creates, sort of a grief process cascade in myself at least. And so kind of bringing those two things together, what I'm feeling right now is that we do need to have that compassionate empathy that Maddie's talking about, but also it's like my dad would say in sermons when we were going through the schism in the church. He said, I'm not going to, I'm going to defend the person who was just raped, right? Somebody has absolutely been violated in this process. And I feel like we in our business have been violated over the last, well, not just the last 4 years, but for a long time, we've been censored. We've been violated in this process. And so I'm going to defend that and fight, but I'm not going to force anybody to turn the other cheek. So I'm not going to force Ryan to turn the other cheek. I can make the decision to turn the other cheek and be empathetic and compassionate, but I'm not going to force Ryan to do that. Now, I feel like we should kind of have a call to action to say it's like a boxing match that just happened, right? There's a legal sanctioned fight that just happened in the ring, and one fighter won and one fighter got knocked out. The fighter who won walks over to the other opponent and reaches his hand down and says, "Hey, get up. We both just fought this fight together. Like, what can we do now together? Where are our similarities? Let's walk out of this ring together." And so, how can we, when you've got people who aren't listening, who are completely incurious and they're angry and think that they've been violated and that their rights are being taken away, how can we communicate in such a way that we're going to meet them somewhere in the middle to sort of bring them in, right? Sort of a moderate point of view that's like, to your analogy with the Fruit Loops, hey, how about you have these not poison Fruit Loops, right? Like that's at least progress over perfection. So how can we be less toxic in our communication? And I don't know that anything has been toxic necessarily.
Well, first of all, Anne, I just want to make clear that I'm a purist. Okay, so I wouldn't go from less toxic Fruit Loops.
Yeah.
I would, and before I say what I would do, I'd like to know how Ryan would respond or how he would what he would say.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have so many different thoughts about everything you all have said. The first thing I have to share is one of my favorite quotes from a Winnie the Pooh movie, where Rabbit is trying to lead the group to find Christopher Robin. And he's got this map that's clearly confused and upside down and wrong. And he's leading them off a cliff, basically. And he says, "What are you going to trust? This official map or your own lying eyes?" Right? So, whenever I find people who literally are wanting to, like you say, trust the New York Times over, someone's lived experience, their own lived experience often. It's sort of like, well, I can't be experiencing this. I couldn't possibly be having a vaccine reaction because the New York Times told me that I couldn't. And so therefore, this must be something else. And then they go and spin their wheels. We've had people refer to us, right, from our friends who literally are dealing with vaccinosis or long COVID, right? And then they find out that we're FLCCC and we do ivermectin. And they're like, oh, I'm going to go look for somebody else, right? Because even though we've been told by our patients that, hey, what these guys do works, right? They end up, because, hey, the New York Times or whatever, whatever magazine or whatever it was said, that ivermectin doesn't work, it's horse paste, da 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 da, that these guys must be quacks, cranks, whatever, and I'm not interested, right? So this is the challenge that we deal with, where people's experience ultimately gets dismissed, And it's definitely, I find it frustrating, but I think, that's really, and I just want to push back a little bit on something you said. You're a pure, yeah. You said I'm a purist. The thing about it is about purity is that it's always shades of gray. There's no such thing as perfection, right? And so what you're saying is basically, I would not waste my time saying, let's make Kellogg's less toxic. I would say, you need to eat the Three Wishes cereal, which is much better for you if you're going to have cereal at all, right? Or overnight organic steel cutout, something like that, right? And I think that's reasonable, but then obviously you're going to have people on the paleo side who are like, why are you even wasting your time with grains? Or actually, Three Wishes is a grain-free cereal, but it has beans in it. A lot of
Okay.
paleo people don't like beans, so it's sort of like, that's sort of, you're going to come up against somebody who's going to say you're not being pure enough, even
Yep.
though it's
Absolutely.
organic, it still has legumes in it. It's sort of like there's always going to be some purity test you fail. So I get that you say you're a purist, but I would just say that what you really mean, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what you really mean is that you're a stand that people are not taking half measures, that they're not, making that you're not a fan of incrementalism. You're like cold turkey, go all in, dive straight in and take it on, whatever it is. And look, I agree. That's how I am. But I would just say you know, it's not quite the same as being a purist. Maybe that's a semantic
Okay.
issue, but
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying?
Semantic issue.
Okay.
Okay. But if I were to create it in language, yes, heck yes. End game,
Mhm.
I'm absolutely a purist. How do we get there is the conversation I'm engaging both of you in right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
And what, go ahead.
we're using these sort of health coaching analogies. That's what we do it for a living, to kind of talk about how we need to be in communication or in communion with our friends who just lost the election and they're very upset and hurt. And so, all I'm saying is that when I have a client who comes in to our office and she is morbidly obese and she's eating fast food 3 times a day and drinking Diet Coke, I'm not going to take her from doing that to suddenly cooking 100% of her meals and eating grain-free, dairy-free, doing any kind of food sensitivity testing. That's going to be too, like, why don't we just say, hey, how about we make some better choices when we go to McDonald's? Right? Like, you're going to McDonald's anyway. Let's find ways to make progress. Or how about we start the day with a smoothie? How about one meal out of the day you're not eating fast food, right? And so we get them there, and it is the incrementalism that you're talking about. And that's the kind of analogy that I think that we need to have anytime we're having these nuanced conversations about sort of the political field. My thing is that, yeah, I might have some beliefs that are, pretty
Mhm.
dogmatic, but
Yeah.
I'm always going to find a way to moderate my dogma so that I can say, okay, I agree with you on this thing, and now I'm going to draw you into my conversation, because otherwise every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And it's the same thing when you've got sort of ideological, dogma on one side and ideological dogma on the other side. You're just going to fight. Like, let's find the common ground.
Yeah. So, real quick, I promise I won't take too much
Okay,
time.
because I
So,
got to
so
respond to that.
right. So we have a very different clinical approach. So I want to talk about the clinical real quick and then the political real quick, because I think you're absolutely right on the political, by the way. But I think that it's different from the clinical, because the clinical, someone's come to me, they've paid me money.
Mhm.
I'm going to tell them, this is my philosophy. And I actually talk to people and I say, look, we can approach this incrementally, excuse me, or we can approach this cold turkey.
Yep.
My preference is cold turkey. Clinically, that's what I like to do. It's what I think gets the best results the fastest.
Absolutely.
And if you're like, hey, I'm here for it. I paid you money. I wanted your best advice. Please give it to me, doc, which I'm going to tell you 98% of my patients, that's how they are because they probably came to me because that's what they needed or that's what they wanted, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so that's my clinical approach. It's definitely it works because people have paid me money.
Yep.
Okay. Excuse me. I may need to take a coughing break here in a second. But basically people have because they paid me, I think they're open to, hey, I don't want you to eat at
Right.
McDonald's anymore. Instead, I want you to go to local foods or Flower Child, and I want you to eat these things, right?
Mhm.
Not like you said, not like they have to suddenly, I agree, they shouldn't have to immediately go to cooking all their meals, but I think that there's ways to get meet in the middle. And I'm sorry, I need to take a break here.
Oh, were you complete with your thought?
Well, I wasn't quite complete with my thought. I just want to maybe make sure that I'm complete with my thought.
Yeah.
So, I was talking about how that we are, we have sort of a different clinical approach because of the fact that people come to us, they paid us money, and they're usually at a point in their life and with their health journey where they're ready to take on some dramatic changes. And
Amen.
so really what I do, and this is my approach, but everybody has their own approach, is that I throw a bunch of stuff at people and I say, you'll want you to do your best at this. I'm not expecting perfection. But at the 3-month mark, 90 days, we're going to find out, what worked, what didn't, what were you able to do, what were you not able to do, and then recalibrate,
Yeah.
right? The one pitfall I've seen with that is that sometimes you'll have people that, after, you'll check in with them in 2 weeks and they won't have started anything, right?
Yep.
Because they're just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing you do. You do have to have that 2-week check-in where it's like, okay, how are things going? Um, and then sometimes you can say about, okay, we're going to start by just doing the diet, or we're going to start by just taking the nutraceuticals. Usually the diet is what I always start with, actually.
Uh-huh.
And then if they're struggling with the diet, aspects of the diet, sometimes it's like, let's just start with like worrying about avoiding these foods, you know what I mean? Or focusing on bringing these foods in, or focusing on eating all organic or whatever, just whatever seems like it's right there and that's going to make the most difference for them.
Sure.
But the challenge I've seen with incrementalism in the clinical context is just that sometimes the progress is so slow that they don't really feel like it's that they're making any progress and it's not working. And so that you'll lose them to follow up, right? So they'll be
Mhm.
like, I'm not seeing major changes. I'm really not seeing any changes. And I've been taking these things or doing these things for 2, 3 months. And so then they just don't follow up.
Right.
When you have them on an annual wellness plan, usually they'll follow up. But that's why I'm a big advocate for, some kind of a membership process when it comes
Absolutely.
to any kind of healthcare practice. But I think, yeah, I think that those are the sort of pros and cons. Is that you get better results faster with that
Yeah.
sort of all-in cold turkey, but sometimes it's overwhelming, and sometimes you get not enough results and people lose follow, but it's easier for people. So
Sure.
and so compliance is a little easier. So that's I think with politics though, I think you're absolutely right. I think incrementalism is probably the only approach because
Yeah.
no one's coming to you and saying, "Hey, you're my political guru. I want you to tell me what to think and how to vote." Nobody's doing that, right? And I'm going to pay you, right? I'm going to pay
Yeah.
you to tell me who to vote for, right? Like nobody's doing that. And so I think because we're having these are just, person to person conversations, I absolutely think, you know, like for example, if I talk to somebody and they're like, "Oh, just got my COVID booster," I'll usually say, look, I totally, my practice is all about COVID. We focus on COVID prevention. And I really just want you to know that the evidence that we got some new stuff that's come out. There's some new studies that have shown that actually you're more likely to get COVID with more boosters that you've gotten, especially the new variants.
Yeah.
And so you're probably better off working on building your immune system. So there's a way to talk about it, and we do that, and we support people with that in our practice. And so, obviously that's my bias, but yeah, I mean, I think that now I want to hear what Maddie has to say.
So what would you say to the families of the kids who are still eating Fruit Loops?
I would say you've got to get rid of the Fruit Loops. You can't have anything like that in the house. And you can buy the Three Wishes that is fruity flavored, which has like 3 grams of sugar per
Yeah.
serving.
Right.
It's
But
a much
I
better
mean,
product.
it is a
And that
better
way they
product.
don't,
But is it accessible? I mean, that's the thing is that
yeah, they have it at Sprouts, they have it at Central Market, they have it at
they have it
uh,
at
Whole
Kroger,
Foods.
like
That I don't know.
You're talking
that's
about
the thing.
Albertsons and Ralph's and Vons and
Right. Like,
Kroger
Right,
and
right. That's a good
I
question. I
think
don't
that's
know because I
where,
don't really shop at those stores.
right.
That's a fair
Like,
question.
I think that's
Yeah.
where when we are talking about getting Kellogg's to, they're not going to stop making Fruit Loops. It's their, I love we've gone such a tangent and it's such a great analogy with one product. But they're still going to make what they're going to make. And as a country, we can't ask individuals who are in food deserts, who are on food stamps to and who don't have the education, they don't know, they don't have access to talking to anybody like you and I. We need to take the chemicals out. Like, let's just at least stop poisoning people. And that's how it is with the
Oh,
media,
sure.
right? When we're talking
Yeah,
about,
I'm not saying, but I'm saying it's not either or,
yeah,
right?
we have to
Like
stop poisoning
absolutely.
people.
Yeah, of course we should stop. We should ban that stuff. But I would also say that we also need to stop we need to create an approval process for GMO, which means you have to look at the effects upstream and downstream. You have to look at all of the biological impacts of genetically modifying a food, and you have to make sure that there's not any um, consequences that you haven't thought of, and you need to test it for
Sure.
probably a close to 15 to 20 years before you approve it, and then it needs to go through a very. I'm not
Okay.
someone who's like, oh, we should never GMO anything, because I think it's true that genetic modification has gone on for thousands of years through crossbreeding and trying to, and so all we're trying to do is make it a little faster, and that's the argument for it. But I would say, okay, we're a little faster, so not hundreds or thousands of years, but still a couple decades to make sure that we're not making a big mistake, which I think that, when you're putting fish proteins into tomatoes and not labeling the tomatoes as containing fish proteins for someone who may have a fish allergy,
Sure.
that's potentially catastrophic, literally deadly,
Yeah.
and it's just like nobody cares.
Yeah.
So then that fish allergy person then has to eat organic, which I'm like, look, I'm all for organic, right? But again, that gets back to your point about food deserts and things like that.
Right.
And my dad, we have this argument all the time. Maybe not all the time, but it's a common argument we have where I'm like, hey, I think they should just ban these pesticides. And he's like, well, but if we had to go to all organic, we wouldn't be able to afford to feed everybody. And
That's
I don't think that's,
BS.
yeah, I don't think that's true. But I
It's
think
not
that that's
true.
the narrative. That's the narrative. That's what
Absolutely.
most people believe.
Okay, so we're using this food conversation as an analogy. This is where it started, as an
yeah.
analogy to talk about what our milieu is right now with the current situation after the election and having people who don't quite understand our perspective. And,
You can't just go to my dad and say that's BS, right? Because then he's
no,
going to be like,
exactly.
well, you're
Because,
BS, right?
yeah, because for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so
Right.
there's did you read the Jeff Bezos opinion that he published in Washington Post early this week or late last week? He's
No.
basically saying, and he owns the Washington Post. He was saying, look, we're crap. We've done a garbage job being journalists. We've lost all journalistic integrity. And the problem is twofold. The problem is that number one, journalists need to be reporting the truth. And number two, they need to be perceived as accurate, right? That perception of accuracy is something that he really kind of unfolded a lot of information about in his piece. And his
Well, I mean, I would say that actually both of those come from one problem, which is that the schools that train journalists and the company are and the newspapers and news organizations all share one thing in common, okay, and that's who funds them, you know.
Right.
And we've gone from a model where the newspaper, you had to pay for it and it was primarily funded by subscribers,
Right.
to now it being all about advertisers and advertising.
And
And
so,
that's
yep,
that's the problem. I personally, my view is you should not be able to call your outlet a news outlet if
yeah,
you take 1 cent of advertising dollar
yeah,
from anybody.
right.
It should
And-
be subscription only. If you
right.
want to know the news, you need to be a subscriber, and that's it. And
Yeah.
that's how a lot of independent media works.
Right. And so the analogy is Fruit Loops. We've got a poison product here in the United States. We've got a not poison product in the same product,
Less poison product.
less poison product in the European Union that's legal. A lot of that stuff's illegal. So with media, we've got poison media and we've got independent media that's, at least got some sort of integrity as far as what they're talking about. So
Well, at least on the
how do
funding
we,
piece. Now, a lot of them have a bias, right?
yeah,
But usually they're open about that bias.
well, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I acknowledge Jeff Bezos for saying that. Because even though he owns that media outlet, it doesn't mean that he can keep track of all the arms and all the, the talking heads, that are in charge of that media.
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring it back to your practice. I am.
I want to make sure Anne finished what she had to say about that, though.
Okay.
Okay. I think I did.
Did you?
I think so. I think it's just trying to put a bow on the fact that we kind of got a little tangential and then, we were trying to get back to what Maddie originally said.
Yeah, we're all going to bring it back.
Empathy.
I'm going to help. Yeah, we're going to support each other with bringing it back. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I was acknowledging Jeff Bezos and then bringing it back to your practice about.
By the way, I'm not acknowledging Jeff Bezos because, again, he has not put the finger on what the cause of those two phenomenon he described is. All he's done is describe the problem. He's the symptoms. He said nothing about that underlying cause because he knows he's part of the cause.
Now, who's a purist?
Yeah.
Well, look, it's not about being a purist or not. It's about calling a spade, sweetheart.
Okay.
Well, it is, because when he's saying like, well, people need to trust that we're accurate and the trust piece is a problem, but also being accurate is a problem. It's like, well, yeah, we would trust it if it wasn't complete fabrication that you're coming up with, in the media. So anyway.
Or media that has a slant, that yeah.
Well, you can't call yourself the news if you have a slant or if you have an agenda or if you're propaganda, which is how I view most of these legacy outlets.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. So bring it back to your practice and then bring it back to Kellogg's and bring it back to politics. Okay. All right.
By the way, I'm smiling. We have an ongoing debate about Jeff Bezos. Okay. I don't like him. She likes him.
No.
Right. So if that wasn't obvious, I don't
like him or don't like him. I don't invest energy in that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's another conversation. But let's stick with this. Okay.
Well, you admire him. Let's put it that way.
No. I think no.
You have told me that you feel like that he is, No,
there are no feelings invested in it. Jeff Bezos is Jeff Bezos is Jeff Bezos. Okay.
Well, remind me what.
And there's the practices that he has within his conglomeration corporation that have integrity for him, but do not have integrity for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And I do think that the creation of Amazon is a brilliant mechanism.
Cheers.
Okay, that has served me and that has served so many people.
Yeah.
Does he have integrity within those operations? No. I have check boxes. No. Okay, not for me. Someone's integrity, my integrity may not be his integrity.
Absolutely.
So Absolutely. That's okay. So I'm gonna another conversation.
Well, but I think this is worthwhile. I think the degree to which Amazon acts as a marketplace to connect mom and pop shops to the internet is fantastic. I
Yeah.
think the degree to which they take over the market, with this basic, putting pressure on people to constantly lower prices and create basically the new Walmart run amok, which is basically how I see Amazon, is like, I mean, I'll never forget Howard Dean, back when he was still a progressive populist, getting on the Diane Rehm show saying people should stop shopping at Walmart, right? It's like, okay, well, but here's the thing. Um, and people said the same thing about Amazon a few years ago, and then COVID hit, and it was like, okay, well, that ship has sailed, right?
Right.
But I just think that, to me, you can admire the sort of business competence of the guy, but you have to acknowledge that the business has fundamentally altered the lives of Americans and not really on a net positive for their economic health and well-being. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is it's fed a lot of consumerism and it's made access to different products easier
I just
for
want to
those who
say,
can afford those products. But
Yeah.
it's diminished at the same time the number of people who are able to afford those products.
I agree with you, and you just inserted the whole admiration thing, which is not what I
Okay,
said.
well, I guess it occurred for me as admiration. I'm sorry if it's not admiration, respect maybe.
No,
No,
there's
that's
no
the wrong.
feeling or emotion
No
involved.
feeling or emotion.
Okay,
Okay,
his integrity is his integrity,
Yeah.
okay.
and I'm not going to spend any ounce of energy, either in admiration or criticism. And so this is where I'm leading with our conversation presently. Okay,
Okay.
beloved, it's my turn.
I agree.
Okay. um, my one of my superpowers is really seeing into uh I'm moved by this, the resilience of the human spirit. Okay, so when this woman with obesity, and I'm going to be very intentional with my language,
Hmm.
because this is a woman dealing with obesity. There are people dealing with cancer. There are people dealing with what they're dealing with.
Yes.
Not an obese woman, not, like a cancerous person. So I'm going to uncollapse that for a moment.
Sure.
So when this woman walks into your office, she's a cry for something. She's a call for something.
Hmm.
And sometimes human beings need a catalyst to alchemize the awakening within them,
Yeah.
like that power within them. Just like we've all witnessed somebody in a bad relationship, right? And on the outside, we see, oh my gosh, we know where that's heading. But sometimes these people must walk that walk so that, there's an internal awakening that happens inside.
Hmm.
Okay, so that they reclaim the power that they have. Okay, so when this woman walks into your office, she sees you as that catalyst, Anne.
Hmm.
Okay, someone with the knowledge and the mastery and the example. And so I would absolutely start with an acknowledgement of her. Like it took something
Yeah,
for you to be
absolutely.
here. Like you see what you're doing presently is not working for your life. And
Absolutely.
it's having an impact in every moment of your life.
Yeah.
In your own brain, whatever chatter like you're telling yourself, the negative speak you're telling yourself, it has an impact on everybody that you interact with, that you deal with.
Yeah.
Maybe a husband, maybe your children. Maybe you're short with them
Yeah.
because you're dealing with so much internally.
Exactly.
So it took something huge for you to be here. I acknowledge you for that.
Yes.
And so here is where we're going to start. This is my world. Okay, this is on the other side of what you're dealing with, and like the pathway is you're dealing with the breakdown right now. On the other side is such a huge breakthrough that exists for you.
Yes.
And I'm going to support you with walking that path. And here's what my world, this world that's available to you looks like. And we're going to make a big dent in it for the first 90 days.
Yeah.
And this is how we're going to make a big dent in it. It no longer works for you to eat at McDonald's.
Yeah.
It is proven time and again, and we have proof and statistics that it doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
So these are your substitutes within within your local area. Could
Right.
still have your burgers, could still have your fries,
Mm-hmm.
but eat here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna start out with a big dent, and then we're gonna deal with it, all the emotions and the thoughts and the feelings that you have along the way, because you are going to deal with those.
Yeah. Amen.
So let me bring it back to so we were Kellogg's, right?
Yeah.
Somebody has to care about being the catalyst for those people on the other side.
Yes.
And it starts with engaging them in conversation, getting over there in their world
Exactly.
about what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, I read about a teacher, a public school teacher, engaging her students in this very conversation, you know, about the ingredients that are in what they're eating.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the first question these kids posited was, why are they feeding us this?
Yeah.
So that question is a seed, right? A conversation is a seed that will bloom.
Yes.
And I just saw something for us, actually. You know, the dream that I had, Anne, that I intentionally had about you. Like, what is your role in this new era, this revival? And it is to teach, not only virtually but in person. And I think there's something related with this area. Like who is it? Who is it in the Rebel Alliance that will care about those people? Okay,
Yeah.
who is it that's gonna make a crack? You know,
Right.
because we already care about the people who are awakened and that will pay the money and make the investment in their lives to come to us, right? But
Right.
there are people on the other side to reach. And so let me bring it back to politics, okay?
Yeah.
Those other people, they're dealing. I have faith and trust in the resilience of the human spirit. There's a lot of these people that are in despair, you know, about the results and depressed about the results.
Yeah.
That this dark night of the soul will be transformative for them if they want it to.
Yes.
One. So this is the time where we reach out to them. Like, are you okay? What are you dealing with? How can I support you? Like, what is it, not only about this issue, but in their lives?
Yeah.
Okay, I can tell you the people that you care about the most are dealing with so much in their life that they're either medicating with food, work, uh, how do you call it?
Workaholism.
Workaholism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And I can tell you that they've been medicating for so many years that they were looking for something outside of them to save America and to save them and to save their families.
Yeah.
Well, I think that there's people on both sides who are looking for that.
Yes, yes. So this is about everybody, not just people over there, right?
Right.
That this is
And
a time.
I have bad news for everyone, which is that there's no one coming. You're
Yep.
it.
Amen.
You're
That. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I
this
mean,
is-
you've heard the be the change, you know, you wish to see in the world. And there's, I mean, look, to me, that's it's not just a platitude. That's real.
either way,
You,
and if the
you have
results
to.
were different,
Yeah.
it would inspire in me, you know, a rising. Okay,
Yes.
let's go to the work. Let's go to work, Rebel Alliance. What can we do?
Yes.
you know? Um, so yes, I invite us and people to start.
Well, and that's a great point because before you'd make your invitation, because look, you just said Rebel Alliance. Look what happens. Right now we're at that moment. Return of the Jedi, the Death Star, second Death Star has just exploded.
Yep.
But wait, what happens? The Republic comes back, but there's still corruption, and there's still the First Order comes up, and you've still got the ghost of Palpatine that's, puppeteering everything from the background, and you've got the sequels, that go through all that, and these new movies. The point is that that fight never ends, right? It's always there, and I think that's what we have to remember. And look, I mean, for me, what I am actually, I want you to make your invitation, and then I have one more thing to say after that.
Yeah, I'm moved right now because I'm very present to the spirit of America, like the spirit of Americans, that it was created by outliers, okay? Straight rebels.
Yeah.
And the people that have come here, like the immigrants, like my parents, are rebels.
Yeah.
So it's not just, Americans, and it's everybody that came here, the spirit, their spirit.
Yeah.
And so I truly believe that the spirit, that spirit has spoken in a landslide.
Yes.
And you know what? You know who we defeated?
Hmm.
The billions of dollars of big pharma, the billions of dollars going into corporate media.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so present to who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm not trying to pour water on anything you're saying. I would say we won the battle, right? This is one battle, but the war continues. Big Pharma's still there, you
Yeah.
know.
Heck yeah.
It's not going anywhere.
I'm very,
Not anytime soon.
I'm
But
also very
we
present to
can
that.
keep chipping away at them, right?
Hence, like, ride the momentum.
Right.
Yes.
We just earned,
Hence, keep showing up. Keep showing up.
yeah, what we did is I don't feel like we won anything. I feel like we just earned the right to begin the work.
Hmm.
We earned the right to begin the work. The Trump campaign, not just Trump, the Trump campaign worked like crazy. That man was working like a dog on this campaign, and
Mm-hmm.
so was everybody else around him.
Mm-hmm.
And and we have simply earned enough trust of enough Americans to begin the work, right?
May I,
Yeah, go ahead.
may I contribute to you, Anne, in what you just said? I,
Absolutely.
I, I get the soul of what you're saying, and I'd like to tweak the language a little bit. May I?
Yeah.
It is our fundamental right. And so, in the voices speaking,
What is our fundamental right?
it is our fundamental right. Like you and I and Ryan, we've been doing the work for over a decade. We've already been doing the work.
Yeah.
And so we have a fundamental right to do that. What has happened with the voices speaking is that now it's become visible.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, and I had this thought this morning, actually, as I was driving around. I thought to myself, I used to resent people, mainly conventional medical doctors, who would go on TV or they'd go on podcasts, and everyone would be, "Ooh," and lapping up everything they were saying about integrative, holistic, natural medicine. And I'm like, hello, where do you think they learned that shit from? Pardon my French. But
Yeah.
it's like, and I used to have a lot of resentment towards them for sort of stealing the limelight or taking the credit that I felt like was owed or due to naturopaths and naturopathic medicine. Um, and, you know, I have shifted that view actually, maybe today. But basically my view is really that I think what these people have done is that they have in some way created the space in the conversation. They have broken through the resistance that people have to anything that's not conventional, right? And so now that people are ready for us, it's like they're ready to listen now because it's like, oh, I've heard enough of what I sort of trust.
Sure.
Those people basically saying the system is corrupt and we need to look at alternatives. And so now I can actually consider like, maybe I should have a naturopathic doctor, right?
Right.
Or maybe I should go see a holistic nutritionist, right? To me, I think that, it's a whole new framing that I've seen, and I think it really works. I think now is our time.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why you've seen so many, conventional medical doctors really saying a lot of the same things that we've been saying for decades is because that's what society was capable of listening to.
Yeah.
And I think that's shifting. I think that it's our time.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about what society is capable of listening to, and been a tipping point in that, essentially, that's where we want to come back to Maddie's invitation, to a better, brighter future, right? Like, I don't know. I feel like we've been under some dark times. Go ahead, Maddie.
I'm going to keep myself accountable for that. I'm going to actually reach out to somebody that I know is in a tizzy and like a stupor and depressed and very sad about what's happened. So I'm going to do that today. And I'm not going to text them. I'm going to call them.
Okay.
Because I believe that communication exists as an exchange with your voice and your frequency and your energy, not through text and not through bombarding people with like proof of this and you should do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do a lot of that.
Yes, I'm referring to my what? 2 hour 19 second episode. I'm a okay. palatable, and are the fundamental.
Well, look how long we've been talking. You think we could convey everything we've said in 10-minute clips?
That's why podcast exists,
Right.
and that's why.
So what are you doing? Racketeering on the podcast format?
I'm not.
Okay, good.
I'm just saying that we can make a difference in a 5 to 7 minute conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I see that.
Absolutely.
Too. Yeah.
So what were you saying about teaching in person? You were going to go
So I see us organizing, we have communities. We have our friend community. We have the church community. We have, just think about all the communities that we have in our circle, to organize something even at our home, to invite people over to start spreading the word and arm them with, or be that catalyst, for them to speak to their circle of friends, like ripples. Okay. Yeah, there are many levels at which we can do that, like in our own communities with people that are already questioning, already asking.
It was so interesting. We were at a church event a few weeks ago, and we were sat down with one of the older members of the community, and she said to us, what do y'all do? And so we explained to her what we do. And she said, I've been hearing a lot about some of this stuff from Robert Kennedy, who has now joined the Trump campaign. And we were like, yeah, no, we're big supporters of Bobby Kennedy. And we've met him, and, we kind of got in the whole conversation. But, it was fascinating to me that that was the connection that she was able to make. It's like, I can relate to that because I've seen it from Bobby Kennedy as part of now the Trump campaign. And so it's like, I have a window to that, right?
Isn't that so beautiful? Bobby Kennedy is that catalyst.
Yeah.
Well, not just for Trump, but for, I think, the entire Republican Party. I think for
Yes.
a lot of the disaffected Democrats who probably have followed him, at least in voting for Trump.
Yeah.
I think for just so many people, a lot of them, I would say so many independents. I mean, he was
Oh,
winning
yeah.
independents before he joined with the Trump campaign. And that was why. I mean, I think ultimately he was like, where can I make the most difference? Am I gonna make the most difference, getting 15% of the vote? Am I gonna make the most difference joining the Harris campaign or joining the Trump campaign? And I mean,
Right.
as we know, he reached out to both of them. The Harris campaign refused to meet with him, and or Kamala Harris refused to meet with him, and Trump not only met with him, but was very willing to create the unity party movement that basically has expanded to include people like Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson and Dana White and just a lot of different personalities. I mean, it's kind of Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard. It's just this. It's like this. They're calling it now the Justice League.
Yeah.
Um,
That's such a beautiful question he asked from the very beginning. Like, how can we knock down these fences?
Yes.
yeah. Well, and I think he's really been looking to see where can I make a difference, right? And that's the same question we ask ourselves, every day. So where can I
Absolutely.
make the most difference?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you, but I woke up yesterday and was just like, all right, we've got 4 years.
I think it's going to be at least 12, but that's
I
that's my prediction.
That is my hope.
Whew.
And right now we know we have 4 years. And so
Correct.
we need to make a lot. And I know that, you know, plans are in place, obviously, but I just feel like we need to have the momentum um within ourselves, that it's we've got 4 years. It's going to go by really quickly if we just sit around and twiddle around on our phones, you know?
Well,
Yeah, so
I think now's the time to sort of be, to borrow a phrase from the LGBT community, to be out and proud about being natural, integrative, holistic healthcare providers.
Yep.
That's something that I feel like is something that I personally have felt cagey about in the past.
Yep.
Like, do I want to just say I'm a physician, or do I want to say I'm a naturopathic physician?
he's
You
he's
know,
had quite
like
an
that's,
evolution with that. When I
well,
was
I mean, I have,
when I
go ahead,
when I was developing
finish your
all
thought.
the marketing material in the beginning, I'm all, what do you want to be called? And then
Yeah.
he would, why do you want to be cagey about it? You are a naturopathic physician, like in full power,
Yeah.
like
Well,
in your brilliance.
so many people have no idea what that means,
Right.
Well, they're getting now.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is I didn't want to engage in a conversation of explaining it to them because I'm like, why do they care? They want to know what I'm going to do for them, right?
Well,
And
and
I still think that that is what people want to do, want. But I would say the beauty of the podcast phenomenon is we can spend time talking about things like what's a naturopathic physician? How is that different from, the doctor I go see, once a year or whatever for my checkups? And what does that look like? And we can have that conversation here, you
right.
know.
Well, and that what you're saying, I think for me resonates in that sort of betrayal slash grief feeling where, especially over the last 4 years with all the censorship on social media, well, and just
Mhm.
media in general, how many times did I put something up on social media about vitamin D or NAC and it was fact checked and with the, like, yeah, it makes you feel like what you're saying, even though it's valid and it's true and it kind of fuels the fire as far, but I'm like ramped up for a fight. That just makes me want to fight.
Yeah.
So, but to go through so many
Well, and
years,
we have to be clear when you say fact checked, right? what you mean is that the corporate sponsors paid off by Big Pharma
Right.
have paid someone to write an article discrediting whatever claim you're making,
Oh yeah.
even though the claim you're making is based on published evidence-based,
Yeah.
research.
Right. Exactly.
So that's just for those who aren't aware of the fact-checking industry that we now have, the fact-checking industrial complex.
Oh man, if any of my people who are watching or listening to this, if they are not aware of that from me by now, y'all haven't been paying attention. I mean, I'm sorry, but
Right.
my friends and family who are watching this and you're not aware of what Dr. Partovi just said, you have not been listening to me because I've been screaming that at the top of my
Okay.
lungs for 4 years. So that's why
Yeah,
there's that betrayal and grief process. It's like,
sure.
great, we won the election, we earned the right to keep working. But
Yeah.
it's like, I told you so. You know, it's been
Yeah.
a fight.
Yes, your feelings and thoughts and emotions are also valid. Like we have our own clearing and completion process, so that we can continue to show up in a way that is compassionate and understanding of people over their own process. And yeah, may I share something that's totally excites me?
Yeah.
um, this so when writing the momentum, I love to create. Okay, and I have been so lit up creating. Okay, what is it? What is there for us to do now? So Ryan and I are creating a 4-part series on our podcast, The Partovi Effect, starting next Thursday.
Okay.
That will be a series about why do we eat the way we eat? And let me
Yeah.
preface this, okay? Every time that we've been out to lunch or dinner, breakfast with family, every time that we've stood there and there was a line to the out the door of people waiting for us to order.
That one I feel
Every
a little bit guilty about, but
every time I have pictures. Every time we train and develop our 7-year-old son to say, no, I don't eat that. That's not optimal for me. It's not part of, my blood type diet.
Yeah.
Every time that we've combated, every birthday party with sugar and carbs and
gluten.
gluten and food coloring,
Hmm.
uh, this is the basis of why we eat, why we eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time that we've invited people over and asking them, what's your blood type? Guests that we've had, we've always catered to their unique physiology. And so this 4-part series will talk about that, like the world of food for the Partovis,
Yeah.
which will lead into the offering of our first online course
Nice.
called Feel Your Unique Physiology, Eating for Optimum Health and Vitality. And it will serve to disrupt people's relationship with food and have them really start asking the questions, is this optimal for my unique physiology?
Right.
So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Well, I think
beautiful.
there's a need, I think there's a need. There's so much gaslighting, there's so much confusion, people get out there and they say, I don't really know what to eat. And there's so many different experts advocating different things. And the reality of the matter is one person's food is someone else's poison. And if
Right.
you're not present to that, you're missing a whole piece of the puzzle. And I
Exactly.
think that piece, if you put that piece in, it's sort of really, it brings all the other stuff into context. It's like, yeah, of course there's vegetarians and there's carnivores because like different people thrive on diets that are frankly very similar to those
Sure.
diets. And the reality of the matter is that doesn't mean everybody's going to thrive on a carnivore diet or that everybody's going to thrive on a vegetarian diet, but it does mean that there are people out there who do thrive on those diets.
Yes.
And if your worldview doesn't include that possibility, then you're going to be pretty confused and you will ultimately not only get confused, but you'll get sort of eventually you become immune to nutrition information because it's sort of like, well, all this stuff is just made up anyway, right? It's all just relative, and you define whatever you eat, right? And it just becomes and I actually think that for some degree, to some degree, it feels almost intentional that they do that. That there's this constant diet wars. I think it's partially it is because people, need different nutrition. And so they think, well, what worked for me should work for everyone, right?
Exactly.
But partially, I think it's also because it serves an agenda, which is the agenda is if we can sort of keep everybody feeling like it doesn't really matter and it's all relative and we can just eat whatever we want.
Until you get diagnosed with, chronic disease.
Right. Then it sort of keeps okay, eat fast food or whatever you want, then go get diagnosed with something, then get started on some pills, maybe get a surgery or two, a procedure or three, and that is the pipeline, right? And we've got to keep the pipeline clear because if everybody were on a personalized nutrition plan that optimally prevented disease for them given their unique physiology, that would destroy this whole beautiful pipeline that the medical industrial complex has created.
Yes.
We're going to train people up on how to read labels.
Good.
Ingredients.
I mean, yeah.
And also be aware of, companies that change their ingredients. Like we have been present to so many times where, clean companies have, oh, wait a minute. You guys just changed your ingredients.
Yeah.
To this amazing product that we have been buying for, years.
No, I mean, we used to buy Smart Sweets all the time, and then they switched from tapioca fiber to corn fiber, and it's like, well, that's gone,
Right.
And it's like, what are you going to do? But I mean, not to call, yes, but to call them out specifically because Smart Sweets, what the F, right? Yeah. But like, I'm not telling you, I mean, I called them, I asked them specifically, what's the source for this? And they told me. So it's not like I'm, libeling or anybody, right? But it's just, I'm calling them out for the fact that they're going for the cheaper ingredient because they want to increase their margin rather than the ingredient that actually is going to support people's health and well-being on a more comprehensive basis.
Yeah.
So,
and this is really a moving, a moving entity because, there are big companies like Siete that just got bought out. Are they going to now change? Primal Foods, that the CEO said, oh, the ingredients aren't going to change. The ingredients changed.
Yeah.
So it's a really big moving.
I mean, just look at Bragg's.
Yeah.
Apple cider vinegar.
Yeah.
The foundation of the health food industry, And then Patricia Bragg dies, the company gets sold, and then of course there's these supposed, group of concerned investors from Hollywood and wherever else that wanted to maintain the purity of the brand. Now you've got apple cider vinegar that looks strangely clear when you look at it. Like,
yeah.
What happened to the mother, right? She's out to lunch,
She's what the heck, Terry Gold, Irish butter, grass-fed butter. What the heck?
Yeah, putting forever chemicals in their wrappers and then wrapping your, fat soluble forever chemicals in their wrapper and then wrapping your fatty butter in these forever chemical packages and then claiming that this is, the world's best butter. It's so great, from the fields of Ireland. It's like you've sullied your product and for what? An additional few pennies?
Yes.
I had to, I mean, that was just such a, man, I had to really go through a lot of emotions with that because my boys, they love butter snacks, like straight butter.
Yeah.
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 So we've been feeding them that for, years, literally.
Well,
but we've switched to I have a Zeal Creamery from New Zealand. I shouldn't call them out because frankly, they're expensive enough. If everybody starts to go buy them, they're going to get even more expensive. But they use paper wrappers.
Or it might drive their prices down.
Oh yeah, maybe we'll get some competition and that kind of thing. Frankly, I've just been so unimpressed by American grass-fed butters. I don't know why, but they're not as yellow and they're not as beautiful and they don't taste as good. Yeah.
Right.
It's really weird.
And what you're describing is really makes I think it causes orthorexia in some, and in others, just complete and utter apathy, where it's like, well, I can never, I'm trying my best, and then all of a sudden, there's a new article that says salt has too much heavy metals, and then these people just, it's like, what am I even do? Like,
Yeah, some
how
people are
can I
so
even eat?
resigned and
Yeah. Well, and that gets back to the purist conversation, right?
Yeah.
Look, my very first patient in clinic was an orthorexic. And
Yeah.
for those who don't know, orthorexia is when you take eating healthy to the point of obsession and you start to become anorexic as a result.
Yeah.
Like you lose a lot of weight, even though you're eating, mostly you're just eating like raw vegetables, and then you just basically get osteoporotic and your periods stop if you're a woman, and
Yeah.
you lose a bunch of weight. You be all of the symptoms of anorexia even though you're still eating, right? But
Yeah.
because what you're eating is so low calorie and low nutrient dense that, and you don't have enough protein, you don't have enough fat, it just, you
Right.
become all the symptoms of anorexia, even though you're still eating. And it's pretty wild. But I mean, I think the fact that that was my very first patient has sort of immured me against the risks there. I always keep in mind that it's all about, uh, finding the best options in a given situation that you're in, right?
Yeah,
If you're on
exactly.
vacation at Disneyland, that may look like having the gluten-free waffle, requesting the gluten-free waffle instead of eating the regular gluten-y waffle that's on the line, right? But if you're, if you're at home, maybe that looks like, well, it could look like a couple things. It could look like I'm going to get a Birch Benders mix that's, keto or paleo or whatever,
Yeah.
instead of the usual, whatever Bisquick or whatever I would have bought before, right?
Sure.
Or, if I've got time, maybe it looks like using some almond flour and arrowroot and eggs and whatever and making my waffle mix from scratch,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it looks like getting a cast iron waffle maker instead and throwing the old, PFAS non-stick one in the garbage,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can tweak things from wherever you are to wherever you want to be. Or, you can just be like, I'm going to get some Birch Benders frozen waffles because I want to throw my Eggos out and I'm going to put these guys in the
Exactly.
toaster. Maybe that's where you are right now, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So wherever you are, there's things you can do. And I think that gets back to what you're talking about. And I think it gets back to the political conversation. It's like, hey, wherever you are politically, it's just, to me, it's really tough because people are very attached to their sources. And I think source bias is our number one problem politically in this country. But actually, that brings me back to what I wanted to say after you had said what you were going to say. So that I reminded now of what I was going to say, which is actually something that your dad said, which I love so much that it has informed my whole life. And I think about it all the time, which is it's all necessary.
Mm-hmm.
it all
Okay,
matters.
we need those other guys as much as we are needed. Now, does that mean we have to be satisfied with however they believe right now, whatever they think right now, and just be okay with them continuing to just use polypharmacy and surgery to, deal with whatever? No, obviously we can try to influence them, right? The same way we try to influence each other theologically, and you see theological change that's occurred over the course of centuries,
Yeah.
right? And certainly some of it's even occurred over the course of decades more recently. But I
Yes.
would say that what it does mean is that when it comes to health and well-being, that is kind of how we do it. And you're right, we have this opening now, where as a society we can start to move the needle. And it's funny because when I would bring up the health stuff to them, the Democratic friends and family of mine, they'd say, oh, well, everybody's becoming aware of that. And that's kind of becoming like in the societal awareness now. And that's things are going to shift on that regardless of who wins. And I was like, well, I love your optimism.
Right.
And, and, you know,
I'm sorry. I mean, but they're feeding their own children or allowing their own children to consume.
right. So there's that too. Right. And, so I think that there's like a desire to believe that like my side has all the answers,
Mhm.
right? I don't need to get, there's nothing for me to learn from the other side. And I think that's fundamentally a toxic view
Yeah.
because it's the view that causes schism in churches. It's
Yeah.
the view that causes us, it's the view that caused civil war, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about toxicity. I hate that term applied to ideas.
Mhm.
But I think if we have to point to any idea and call it toxic, it's the idea of my side has all the answers, your side has none of the answers. There's nothing for me to learn from you or from your side. F you, F all of the people who agree with you, and uh,
And
et
there
cetera, et
there
cetera. So
happens like the severing of, the human family.
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And
And
what
to
you're
me,
saying,
go
yeah,
ahead.
what you're saying is absolutely, because what we're asking for with the Fruit Loops example is to have some regulation over an industry. That's a very left idea. That's a very
Yeah, historically, for
liberal
sure. Yeah.
idea, is to have federal regulations over anything,
Right.
right? The libertarian, conservative would say it's a free market. It doesn't matter what companies can do whatever they want to do. We should have no regulation over that. So that would be the right. And so, yeah, we do need to learn from
The
our.
problem is it a free market if all the companies that make these products collude not to actually fully
Sure.
disclose? Like, let's assume a completely free market where none of the you don't even have to put the ingredients, right? Like
Right.
a true free market. You don't even have to list your ingredients. And they
Right.
say, oh, but the companies that list the ingredients will have better will have people will want to buy those because they'll appreciate the information. To which I would say, not if all the companies get together on a Zoom call and decide none of us are going to put ingredient
Sure.
labels. And if anybody tries to put ingredient labels on their products, we're going to buy them out. Or we're going to, smother them in some way, or go, hire somebody to assassinate their leaders, or what, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many different possibilities in a truly free market, and that's why, again, you have to say, look, yes, on one hand, we do want to encourage freedom and innovation, but on the other hand, that we do need to have some elements where we do say, "Lo, you have to put ingredients on the label. They have to be accurate. You have to, like there has to be some basic accountability."
Right.
Because otherwise, people are going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to collude, and that's just as companies get bigger, that's inevitable.
Yeah.
And so, unless you're going to have that the company that makes the cereal for this town is located in this town and they're only accountable to the people in this town,
Right.
then you have to have some kind of regulation. You have
Right.
to. So
Amen.
anyway,
You do. You have to have some kind of regulation. So, um, Maddie, you were talking about teaching in person. You said, and then it kind of launched you into the four-part podcast series. What does that look like for you as far like what do you think where do we start teaching in person? We have our two communities, some of that overlaps between our families. Um,
Yeah, so while you were I see images in my mind, like movie reels. Um, that's how I receive messages from God.
yeah.
And so that house next door is empty. So I'm gonna reach out to because our neighbor died from cancer within a 5-month period, and she wouldn't accept support from us. And her son
that's
wishes.
not entirely true. She accepted certain kind of support, but
I
not
mean, like treatment for her
right.
cancer.
Right. It was just all supportive stuff.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Her son wishes she had, said yes, because he's definitely illuminated. I'm going to ask him to use that space, and we're going to invite people. uh, You know, we're going to create an event,
Okay.
okay, um, for our various communities.
Absolutely.
So that's where we'll start for in person. Um, and then, there's this 4-part series about that. That's where I'm going to start creatively. to get the word out.
Mhm.
Um, I'm on a publicity warpath right now.
Yep.
And I'm going to reach out to the major entities like the FLCCC and other podcasts, that are aligned with us, so that we can partner.
Mhm.
Partnership and creating teams like is the way to go to
Yeah,
create that massive ripple effect.
absolutely.
Okay, so that's my answer to your question. Where do we go from here? And that's where we're going to start.
Okay. All right. We're gonna have some events. Well, I think that's great. I think there's some brainstorming we can do aside from this conversation just to get the ball rolling on some of that stuff. I've got some
Mhm.
ideas. I've hosted some events in the past that were successful. So yeah, let's talk about that stuff.
Yeah,
That'll be fun.
fantastic.
Well, I tell you what, it's lunchtime for me.
Yeah.
Same.
All right. Well, thank you so much um, for the conversation and for being open. And, I want to invite everybody to go and visit the Partovis over at what is your podcast again? The Partovi Effect.
Yes.
Correct.
It's
Creating
available
creating
anywhere.
the consensus.
That's right, creating the consensus. It's very good, very informative. Um, You guys are a great team because Dr. Partovi does all the nerdy stuff and the clinical education, and then Maddie's able to like bring it back around into what that really means for a human who doesn't understand all of that stuff. So that's
Well, there's a definite duality to our relationship, that I think that is reflective of the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang,
Yes.
just the as you said, the intellectual and the intuitive and emotional, and all of those things are, both are necessary, right?
Yes. We both
absolutely.
serve as catalysts for each other to alchemize like this whole like the fruition of this whole, you know, passion lived into reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen.
And it's funny because I think that there's like a light side and a dark side to it, right? Which I think is worth exploring. Maybe we could have a whole nother podcast on it. But I just think that, for example, when Maddie is catalyzing me, she's encouraging me to do things that maybe are uncomfortable for me. When she is in like the positive form of that, it is actually landing for me as like an opportunity, or an opportunity for me to take another look or think about something differently or take different actions. When it's like the dark side of it, it's more like it occurs as more like she's being mean or critical, or like there's no opportunity there for me, right? And I think with her, it's and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm going to speak for you, and then you can
You
correct
can.
me. Yeah, thank you. Um, I think that when I'm being positive and supportive, I am holding her accountable to what we're committed to. I'm holding her accountable to what's possible, for what I know is possible for her, what I know is possible, and for the integrity of our process. When she experiences me as, kind of the dark side of how I can be, maybe, is when she feels like I'm pouring water on whatever she's wanting to do, and I'm just being negative and critical, right? And I think that is, it's a fine line sometimes, right?
Sure.
And I think it's important for us to be present to that and aware of that, and inside of that, make sure we're
Yes.
we're, we're coming from the place we want to come from.
Very succinct, eloquently said. Right on. Um, Sometimes you can speak right on for me. I'll tell you though, just because we're Rebel Alliance doesn't mean that we're all light side. Okay,
Sure.
there's the dark to deal with,
Yeah.
to address, and to take a look at every day, and each and every single action, and each and every single word.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
my favorite Jedi have always been the gray Jedi, which are basically, if you read the gray Jedi code and you read the Sith code and the Jedi code, you see how it's sort of, it is sort of the code that actually ultimately is going to be the most sustainable, because you realize that there's not, if you're living purely according to the Jedi code or purely according to the Sith code, you're going to come up against some real, barriers to your effectiveness. And it's interesting. So
Such a beautiful analogy for red and blue.
Yeah, it really is.
That's such a great
It really
place
is.
to
well, and that's
end
why I
this.
think being an independent, is or coming from that independent place is
Right.
so great because and it's like I was explaining to somebody recently, one of the ladies that works at my son's school. It's like you've got to keep one foot, even if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you've got to keep one foot in the independent space so that you can still have a conversation with the person on the other side.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so crucial. So
Interior, what is the word that you just used?
independent,
Interior independence
yeah.
possesses an equanimity to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's all necessary. And with that, I'll end another
I hope your dad listens to this.
titillating episode of Feast on Freedom. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. We're happy to be here.
Love y'all.
Love you.
Love you.